This meeting is being live streamed. Okay, great. Excellent. All right, so morning again, everyone. I believe we
Good
are now
morning to
live, and so
you.
everyone is able to see us. Joel, I don't know if you're there with us as well. So I want to welcome you. I'm very sorry for our late start. We had technical difficulties as well as we were preparing ourselves. Carlton, welcome. And so we're all here and ready and rearing to go as we bring to you this exciting webinar on the culture of innovation that we want to establish here in the Caribbean region as well. But before we continue, Joel will invite you to see the opening remarks at this point, well, via a video stream that you have sent previously.
Distinguished panelists, Dr. Leighton Ellis, or Leighton, who is the host and he's also an associate of Growth Perspectives, GP. Clients, partners, and participants from Jamaica, the Caribbean, Latin America, North America, Africa, Australasia, and elsewhere, good morning. I am Joel Allen, the Managing Director of GP. And on behalf of our team, welcome and thanks for joining our first innovation webinar. Through our GP Innovation Enabling Service, we have sought to educate governments, firms, and publics in the Caribbean about why they should innovate and how they can do so. Innovation is a collaborative endeavor, and so we acknowledge the work of, for example, scholars and development agencies who have seen the light and are re-imaging the future of the Caribbean. Renowned economics and innovation professor Mariana Mazzucato and others, for instance, have recently called on public and private sector leaders in the Caribbean to stimulate innovation in order to drive a stronger economic recovery from COVID and diversify our regional economies. These calls, along with the work being done by Compete Caribbean, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, other development agencies, and firms across the Caribbean, not only signals that innovation stimulation can fast-track the region's socio-economic development and reset its participation in the fourth industrial revolution, but it also confirms that both the timing and focus of this webinar on the creation of a culture of innovation are strategically well placed. We define a culture of innovation as an environment that supports creative thinking and advances efforts to extract economic and social value from knowledge, and in so doing, generates new or improved products, services, or processes. Considering this definition and the fact that Caribbean innovation can neither be sustained nor scaled without a supporting culture, our overarching question is, how can public and private sector leaders in the Caribbean create a culture of innovation? We also invite you to pose your questions throughout the webinar, and Leighton will ask Joseph, Diane, Marcus, Annette, and Carlton, our esteemed panel of experts, to answer them. Finally, thanks once again for joining us today. Before handing over to Leighton, I have to say, your active participation in this session will ensure that it lives up to our expectation of being exciting and informative. Have a fantastic webinar.
All right, thank you very much, Joel, for that awesome introduction. Remind us of why we're here and the purpose for which we have been gathered and the direction in which we hope to go as well. To start us off very nicely, we want to give each presenter or panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves slightly for a few minutes, as well as most are in the context of what we're here to discuss, with the idea of a culture of innovation here in the Caribbean realm. And we'll go in a similar order, starting with you, Joseph, if you don't mind. Taking that vantage point, having a nice wide spectrum of perspective on the Caribbean from a CARICOM perspective as to where we may be going as well.
All right, thank you very much. In terms of introduction, Yes, I am Joseph Cox, and I'm an Assistant Secretary General for Trade and Economic Integration at CARICOM. What we have been doing in terms of innovation and in terms of looking at the region in what we call the post-COVID dynamic is that we've been looking at what are some of the real opportunities. Because for us, COVID-19 has not been, it's not so much a disruptor. And you know, there's an old cliche where it says never let a good prices go to waste. COVID-19 has not so much been a disruptor per se, but an accelerant in that a lot of the processes that were already on stream but would have taken quite a bit of time to implement have now, as a matter of course, have to be fast-tracked. So that's one aspect of it. Secondly, we also have to look, we are also looking at it through the prism of ICT, whereby ICT used to be deemed as pretty much a support service. Now it's a principal driver, as we have seen with a lot of entities and a lot of countries. As we start to navigate these trying times, persons are getting more involved in electronic commerce. A lot of companies have had to engage new business models in response to the market, the changes in the market. And therefore you're seeing a culture of innovation actually emerge, whether it might be by design or just a matter of course, coming out of what obtains in the pandemic. Now we have seen in a lot of countries there's fallout, immense fallout, because they in terms of tourism and so on. So the economies have been constrained, fiscal space is limited, and in fact the fiscal accounts have been compromised in some instances. So what you're seeing now is that there are great opportunities because with the supply chain disruptions that have emanated from the process, you have opportunities for our regional products and services to be put front and center stage, so persons can avail themselves of these opportunities that do obtain. And therefore, for us, this creates an opportunity. We don't look at it in the sense of necessarily being negative, because yes, there are some negatives, obviously, that would emanate from this. But there are a lot of opportunities that come from it, and it is for us to look. The opportunities and the change and the pivot that is required is not just restricted to the private sector. There's also a role for the state, because in terms of the service delivery, a lot of the services that are offered by the state, frankly speaking, should be online. And in some cases, they have been online, but it should be online for many, many years now. So it's a matter of, that's why when I speak about an accelerant, that's where we're going with it. So you're seeing for the private sector, there are opportunities that come up in a number of areas for them for persons to embrace new methods of engagement. Even in terms of marketing, customer engagement, there are great opportunities, because the marketers will tell you that initially they would be talking about, for some markets, above the line marketing, which is like a television and the broad mainstream things. Below the line marketing is more targeted. Nowadays, people are talking through the line marketing, because on a hybrid, we are affecting both. So that's what I'm saying to you. This is an exciting time. It's a very interesting period for us to really embrace it. And for those, and let me put this caveat as I stop letting, for those persons who believe that, oh, we can wait out this thing and we'll resume what you used to obtain before, good luck with that. Because markets have changed, customer demand has changed, and profit margins are down. So therefore, there's heightened competition. And frankly speaking, when you look at a region where 60% of the population is below the age of 40, and therefore they are more digitally engaged, etc., you better respond to that market dynamic, or you are likely to find yourself in some problems as you go forward. But I will yield at this point.
Yes,
hope I haven't overstayed my welcome.
Very, very, very good start off and setting the platform for which, Diane, I believe you are now poised to follow on from your vantage point as well. So Diane,
yes,
would you want to take
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Leighton, and good morning, colleagues. Good morning. Panelists, good morning. Everyone who is listening. Yeah, very exciting topic. My name is Diane Edwards. I'm head of JAMPRO, which I define as Jamaica's Economic Development Agency. So we promote investment and export. So really, I want to start by saying that Jamaica right now is 72, number 72 out of 131 countries on the Global Innovation Index. And I think it's critical that we understand where we are as a region and as countries within the region. Our high scores in 3 out of the 7 GII pillars, institutions, business sophistication, and creative output, we're known for that, and we're above average. But we're below average for our income group in 4 of the pillars: human capital and research, infrastructure, market sophistication, and knowledge and technology outputs. So, of course, in that context, along came COVID, as Joseph very graphically stated. So some of the things that we pivoted to with during COVID, we had a new economy task force, which was headed at the time by Minister Favour Williams, who was then Minister of Science, Energy and Technology. And we really came up with 2 critical programs: the National Broadband Network, which is a key enabler to the whole Go Digital effort, and the Go Digital for SMEs. So we had a whole platform, public-private platform developed for Go Digital for SMEs. And that is, I think, those 2 programs are critical enablers. But in addition to that, we are implementing some really exciting programs in JAMPRO and in Jamaica. So JAMPRO is implementing a national business portal. And so Joseph talked about putting government services online. This is the gov.jm B2G, business to government platform, which is going to allow transactions online. And we're actually putting 9 processes online by about March next year. Then we have the GSS, the Global Services Sector Project, which we are implementing, which is really to upskill our young people in digital skills and to help our digital companies, our tech companies, get into the international market. And then there is a biggie project with which we are collaborating, which is boosting innovation, growth, and entrepreneurship ecosystems. A huge mouthful, but the point is that the government understood the need to promote entrepreneurship and the role of entrepreneurship in innovation, because having the ideas is one thing, but it is finding the financing and the entrepreneurship to take those ideas and create viable, sustainable businesses out of that innovation. That is where I think the Caribbean is still lagging behind behind the international market, because they're incipient methods of financing, which you can get into later. But we need to really build the supportive ecosystem, that's the incubators, accelerators, venture capital, angel investors, and build the financial opportunities. If you look at Silicon Valley, why is Silicon Valley successful? Because the ideation leads almost immediately to a venture capital and angel investor network. So that's what we really need to be focusing on in the Caribbean. And then lastly, collaboration. We don't collaborate in the Caribbean. Great to see Annette on board, because Annette, SVG, we're partners in CAIPA, the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies. And I really have to put a plug for the collaboration that we are seeing in CAIPA, because there are almost no other cross-border institutions that represent 23 countries in the Caribbean. And this is the kind of collaboration that I think we need to see. I'm going to stop there and give the floor to others, but really exciting program, and thanks to Growth Perspectives for.
Thanks, Diane, for touching on a number of things that are very important. One of the things that brings back to my mind, a key word you mentioned with innovation in terms of incubation. And I know there's an organization called the Climate Innovation Center that's here linking the SRC and linking Kariri in Trinidad, trying to do some of these cross-borders idea in terms of climate and climate change and climate-related aspects. But again, that doesn't seem to be spread across. But from Marcus's perspective at Jaipur, looking at intellectual property, Marcus, would you mind introducing yourself and then piggybacking on things that may have been said by Joseph and Diane before, you can now take us on a little bit further as well.
Sure. Good morning, all, and nice to see us gathered to discuss these issues of national and regional importance. So I'm Marcus Goff, Deputy Director and Legal Counsel of the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, Jaipur. And of course, when we talk about innovation, we're talking about something that is very central to what we do Jaipur. As Diane mentioned, Jamaica ranked 72 in the Global Innovation Index in 2020. And we very much celebrated that, as a result of, us trying to concertedly bring together different elements and perspectives that can help to make us an increased and improved innovative ecosystem. The GII definitely emphasized our strength in cultural and creative industries, right? It showed that we outperform on innovation in relation to a level of development, and therefore we are punching above our weight in that regard. And I would say that, in that respect, we need to maximize and identify the particular areas that we are doing well with, as Diane did, and to seek to strengthen those areas that we need to work on. Certainly, from a regional perspective, we can see that some of the critical regional issues that would affect us in terms of innovation are low investment in R&D, right? That is something that hinders the interest and the research pursuits and objectives of our institutions, our universities, our other researchers. That's something that we need to really plug the gap with. Right? We look at more public and private partnership arrangements that are needed, international and regional funding that's also available. And so we need to probably have a more concerted mechanism to ensure a steady, sustainable flow of R&D funding. We also need to utilize the IP system more. We need to register our IP rights, our trademarks, have our legal frameworks in place, right? Consistent with international treaties and such, to create that environment that will attract international and regional funding and registration as well, and collaboration in IP and innovation. We also, of course, need to have better data collection as well too, right? We don't have a good track record of collecting data to be able to make innovation-driven decisions, right? And so that's also quite important. And lastly, for us, we see the need to have increased commercialization of IP and IP-based assets. And so for us, we are currently doing a project at Jaipur titled Strengthening the IP Ecosystem to Increase Innovation, Competitiveness and Growth of MSMEs. And so we're trying to create a system whereby persons can use IP as collateral to be able to get increased financing, to drive their innovation endeavors. So we talk more about that in detail as we progress. But thanks for
excellent. Thank you very much for that, Marcus. And we're going to lead over to you. But one of the things that was highlighted before was this issue of data collection. I know, let's say for Amazon, for instance, a very large global company, and one of their main things that they have said is that data is the driving force behind the decisions that they make. So, Annette, from your standpoint, looking at Invest TT, Invest SVG, following what Marcus had said, is data driven in any way in what you do as you introduce yourself? Go ahead.
Okay, thanks a lot. It's really great to be part of this panel, and especially to be here with some of my very esteemed colleagues from across the region. I want to kind of go in a little direction and not rehash a lot of what of my colleagues have spoken about here this morning, but just kind of throw some ideas out, and in particular, food for thought moving forward, maybe in this session or another session. We will all agree here, sitting on this panel, and our audience that is listening in, that we are a creative people. We are innovative. We are creative, and we can see that in our music, our math, everything that we put out to the world. How well we have done. I mean, Trinidad has given the world the steel pan, which I believe, and I stand corrected, is one of the newest instruments that have been created in this century for a longest while. I mean, how is it that we can take a pan and make an instrument that is so melodic and that has a reach throughout the world? And yet, well, there are other talks that we can have on that, but in respect to who it really belongs to at this point in time, the actual patent and etc. But we wouldn't go off there right now. And then now, of course, we have Nobel laureates from the region, 3 of them. For a small, well, I guess, 19 million people, 3 Nobel laureates, I think we've done very well. But at the risk of sounding cynical, and I hear we talk around innovation, and we know that this is the way that we have to go. Coming out of post-pandemic, of the pandemic, we have to be more innovative. We have to diversify from our economies, our traditional tourism and our traditional agriculture. We must diversify. We must not. It can't be just business as usual. But the risk of sounding cynical, I do think that there are certain fundamental issues that have to be addressed in being able to foster a climate that allows innovators and creators to grow. I think one of them is lack of finance, and Diane mentioned that earlier on. We got to be more innovative of how we get investments, how we allow persons, how we foster that climate for innovators. We look at our schooling. Within our schooling, there are all these traditional, everybody wants their children and our schools to be doctors, lawyers. And nothing's wrong with being a lawyer, by the way, lawyers and accountants, etc. But when it comes to that child or those children that seem to be creative and innovative, they always seem to be herded back into the box, and this is the path you're supposed to go. How do we know that within that, where is the system, or where is the person or whoever to recognize that that person could be our next Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or whoever? Within our schools, are we teaching? Are we giving our children the tools to be innovators from schools, and realize that there's absolutely nothing wrong with being creative and innovative? So I think that there are fundamental issues that we need to address, not just here in this panel, but our policymakers, etc. We also have I guess it's the way we're culturalized too. We also have an idea that innovation is for big countries. Innovators come from big countries. We are in the Caribbean. How is it that Jamaica could be 72 on the innovation index? It's because, and it's particularly with the smaller islands, we are impacted more where this is concerned. But it's there, but the systems have to be in place. There needs to be more recognition. There needs to be more support. There needs to be a greater environment. If you look at the world economies, that the emerging economies in the world, it's knowledge-based, it's technological driven, it's innovative driven, and we have to come out of that mold and leapfrog and find ways to leapfrog the region onto that world stage. And within St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have started taking certain steps. We have a lot of work to do. As a business support organization, as a government also, we do have a lot of work to do. We have our own challenges. Everybody knows that as small islands, we have our own challenges. And I like that thought that Diane gave a while ago, that we need to collaborate. We are as strong as our weakest link. So we do need to collaborate. Within St. Vincent and the Grenadines, since about 2004, there's been an education revolution, where there's been universal education. We've had a lot of persons going away within the region, outside of the region, to do high level education. But then they come back, and what do we do? What do we do with these people? It can't be that they're pushed into a bank or whatever. We need to find the avenues and to make sure that these persons there's an environment for them to grow. Yes. Beyond just, being in traditional jobs. And, we've had a number of programs that we've had in place too, but lots more to do. One of them that comes to mind is CARSIP. Please excuse me if I do not say what CARSIP, I know it's CARSIP. It's Caribbean Regional Communication Infrastructure Program, where we received a grant to basically ring fence the OECS with fiber optics. So from the South Grenada, I think, up to Antigua, the islands are ring fenced now with fiber optics. And then there was a grant program that as part of it, where 25 persons were given grants in ICT innovative who had businesses and initiatives. And of course, COVID came along. But what I noted in speaking to persons about this and having discussions is that those more innovative ideas are the ones that have stood the test of COVID and the test of time. And, you know, it tells a story. It's as small as it is, it tells a story. So I will stop there because I don't want to keep rambling on and on.
Right, so we'll flesh out more as we go along. We want to bring Carlton into the conversation now. So as was mentioned by Annette, we have a couple of things there. We have innovation does exist in the space. We see the steel pan. We know that music has been on the forefront in terms of reggae and a number of other art forms. We have dance, we have culture, we have food like the doubles from Trinidad that has been now popularized across the world. But even from your vantage point, Carlton, as you come in through, and you also mentioned by Annette, was education and what reformation is needed there. And I know you have some personal thoughts on that as well, Carlton. So as you come in and introduce yourself, if you can, see if we can touch on any of these things as well.
Yeah, just hopefully you guys can hear me very well.
Hearing you well. Hearing you well.
Cool. Carlton Cummins, born and raised in Barbados. Educated within the Caribbean, so I went to KFL, I went to St. Augustine, pursued my degree in engineering, and to date I live and work in the UK. I run a battery technology company that I'm one of the co-founders for. We make batteries for renewable energy and other sustainable activities, and I guess what I try to bring to the table for this forum is the private sector or the young entrepreneur's perspective from the point of view of one that has existed within the Caribbean and in Europe. I think it is interesting when you see things from both points of view. One of the things I would say that is really important for the Caribbean is some of the not so sexy stuff when it comes to entrepreneurship and fostering innovation. Administrative activities, I think we get really excited about fostering entrepreneurs, but we sometimes lose track of, and I was really happy that a lot of guys mentioned it here, some of the really basic stuff, being able to do more things online, speeding up the processes when it comes to setting up a business, registration of patents. These are the little things that actually tend to improve or encourage more entrepreneurs when it comes to the ideas, because naturally, as a human being, the more complex a process is, the less likely you are to do it. So one of the key things you will observe in a lot of these larger markets is simply their administrative processes are easier. Another thing is that there's a lot of emphasis, and I was really happy someone mentioned it, when it comes to connectivity. It's another really simple thing, but it's very important when you want to, do entrepreneurship, especially on a world stage. Now, to the entrepreneurs, what I would say is one thing that's important from a Caribbean context is that we need to stop seeing things just from our point of view and start building businesses from a global perspective. The money is there. The money is not there for ideas that only solve this specific problem. Money for very specific problems can only be sourced from those specific markets. When you start to view your business from a global perspective is when you start to attract the audience of a global market when it comes to funding.
Excellent.
That's my
Excellent.
quick 2 cents.
Excellent. So now, as you mentioned, money. Well, that's one of the big issues that we've seen throughout the region. And I don't know if Joseph, you can speak to that as well, or even Diane, in terms of that constraint that we may have seen. How accessible is money to persons trying to innovate, trying to start a new business, trying to develop, trying to grow as well? How accessible is that?
All right, if I may just share a few thoughts on that one. One, it depends on the nature of the innovation, as so to speak. For example, if it is something to deal with intellectual property, the person is going to have a challenge. If in a lot of the markets, because it just in terms of providing the requisite collateral, if they're looking for financing, is going to be a challenge because a lot of places do not yet accept or recognize intellectual property as legitimate collateral. That is changing, and that can be changed by legislative fix and policy and legislative fix. But just to bring you up to speed, a lot of the projects and a lot of the issues whereby for innovation, a lot of companies, frankly, it's not just innovative things, but companies in general, it might be interesting to note that across the region, out of all the loan applications that are actually submitted to the financial institutions, only 18%, 18% of them are actually approved. All right. And a lot of that's because the projects, truthfully, great ideas, you know, have a lot of potential, but they're not bankable. They haven't provided a requisite and appropriate proposals for them to receive the financing. And along that's where, let me just share with you something further. It's really interesting to note that, for example, in Jamaica, and I just speak for myself where this one is concerned. I remember a couple of years ago, and then through JAMPRO, we're integrally part of this process. We staged a demand side intervention, which we call the Firm Expo, Financial Information and Real-Time Matchmaking Expo. And what that really was about was seeking to break down the barriers of information asymmetry that obtained in the market. So whereby people have good ideas, but for some reason, some were afraid to engage with financial institutions, some were, they didn't know who were some of the private investors who would engage them, etc., etc. So what we did as part of that process was not only to provide the baseline for them to have the matchmaking, we also took them through a training process whereby basic training, how do you present your document, your ideas? What are the kinds of information potential investors and bankers are looking for, etc., etc. And we're really interested to note that what that intervention yielded roughly $1.9 billion in additional funding for our private investment, but for our business persons. The other thing I wanted to just mention to you, though, is that I'm taking it back to the regional thing, just to show you where we are evolving to as a region. We have recently, well, not so recently, but we have established this facility, the project preparation facility at the, what is it now? The CARICOM Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, CCRE, right? And CCRE, what that is about is for persons who are in, for example, the renewable energy space, who have good ideas, etc., etc. You have a facility that can provide you with, guide you with not only technical assistance, but they will go work with you to do pre-feasibility studies and feasibility studies. All of that within the rubric of making the projects bankable. So I will end as I started, because half of the challenge is on the basis of the projects not being bankable. I will throw one last little tidbit into it. There's also need for tax reform, where somebody with innovation, some of these projects are involved, because a lot of people who are involved in the innovation space are in lots of cases sole proprietors. Sole proprietors, under most of the tax laws that obtain across the region, are not entitled to a lot of the breaks and a lot of the facilities that obtain for a company, and therefore their movement along the growth curve will be that much steeper. I'll yield at this point because I'm sure Dan wants to take me to speak.
Yes, she's gonna jump in, and followed by Dan. I want to hear something from Marcus in terms of what you mentioned regarding the IP challenges as well. So following Diane.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph, of course. I want to follow up on a couple of things he said. I have 4 points to make. One is, Annette spoke about creatives. We've got a lot of creatives, but most of those creatives do not go into their left brain. They're totally right brain, and they don't understand how to make a business of their creativity. If you want innovation from creativity, you have to be able to commercialize. We need to take a totally different approach to how our creatives monetize their creativity, and how we develop the business side of creativity to enable them to do that. And I'm challenging Joseph and CARICOM to really work on that. And we have lots of studies. We've just done a mapping exercise in Jamaica. There was a CTIMU for Caribbean export. We can get into that, Joseph, offline, but I am really challenging CARICOM to look at this question of moving from creativity into innovation. Secondly, the whole question of movable property. Jamaica passed a law called the Secured Interest in Private or Personal Property Act, which really was allowing for mobile property to be accepted by the banking system as collateral. Of course, they have not accepted it. It has not moved because we need to create a secondary market. And how do you value IP? How do you value mobile property like art, etc., etc.? So there's still a lot of work to be done on that front. And again, if we were to collaborate across the Caribbean, we would have a much better opportunity because we need critical mass, and Jamaica alone does not have critical mass, my contention. Point 3, the question of entrepreneurs and financing entrepreneurs. We really need to create that early stage financing, because the problem really is at the early stage. When companies scale up and become medium to large, they can find financing through the commercial banks. Where the gap is the early stage, the angel investors and the venture capital. And that is really what we have to build, again, across the Caribbean. If we had a junior stock exchange, which was Caribbean-wide, it would be a fantastic innovation. And the fourth point is, again, I'm challenging Joseph here. You talk about project preparation facility, absolutely critical. So capacity building of entrepreneurs, but also project preparation facility, because if we want to increase deal flow, we need more bankable projects in a form that even the early stage financiers can take on board. But we don't have that. Under CIPA, Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, we've actually gone to an international company that channels diaspora investment back into the region. It's called Home Strings. And we have developed the Caribbean Project Preparation Facility for much broader than renewable energy, because renewable energy is just one small sector, but it needs a much broader approach across the Caribbean. So I challenge CARICOM to get in touch with that project, and we can put you in touch. You know how to do it, because again, we need to build the deal flow across the region, and we need to build the bank projects. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Diana. What you're clearly pointing out is that, from what I heard from Joseph, what I'm hearing from you, and I'm sure what I'm going to hear from Marcus, is that there are tidbits around the place, but there's no ecosystem that has been brought together to create a cohesive environment, i.e. the culture that is necessary in order to lead us to the next direction. All right, so Marcus, you're going to jump in. I know Carlton has something to say as well. So Carlton and then Annette, I have a question for you following on thereafter. Go ahead, Marcus. Now, right. Your question, your answer in regards to what was stated by Joseph before and also by Diane regarding IP challenges that exist. So many persons are coming to the forefront, especially the creatives. They're naturally creative, they come up with stuff, but seemingly they only function from one side of the brain, as Diane said, which suggests that maybe, we're touching it before, the idea of collaboration, which you can speak to as well, that is necessary maybe with the left side thinker in order to come forward with a proper business idea and therefore being able to develop, and of course the IP related to protect that creative aspect as well. So you could touch on that for us a bit.
Sure. So yes, the reality is that IP is still challenged in many respects, right? In terms of its acceptability as collateral. This is not, again, a Jamaica or a Caribbean thing, but really a global challenge too, that as an intangible asset, how is it to be properly treated, valued, and, used as security for loans. So that is something that our current project, I mentioned earlier, is seeking to address, to create a framework that can work in Jamaica and the region, that can allow our financial institutions to feel more, incentivized and encouraged to accept IP as collateral and to lend to MSMEs on that basis. It's something that we know, will take some work, some consultation, some legal changes to be done as well. But of course, it's critically important, for us in terms of having IP be treated as other assets are in our financial and legal system.
All right. Before you go on, so given that constraint, where are we in this continuum? Is it that another year, another 5 years, another 10 years? What timeline are we working with that this thing could become a reality? How long before the people can have the systems ready for them to be as innovative as we need them to be? Is there any
Right.
timeline you could suggest?
This project is currently going to wrap up in March of next year, by which time we would have had a framework outlined, based on the pilot project that would have been run, where we will have some financial institutions that will try to design a product that could be useful, to see what kind of criteria the banks would want, and what kind of requirements would be put in place for the applicants to be able to apply for funding. So it's something that we would hope would be a framework at the end of the project in March that would be able to be replicated in the region thereafter. I mean, of course, there will be continuous efforts to try to test and see what works, but certainly we would have hoped to have moved the barometer that much further at the end of this project in March.
All right. So in essence, by this time next year, we should be able to see a couple firms or innovators or entrepreneurs starting in this process, being a further on in that aspect. Is that what we expect to see?
Well, we would want to see some of our financial institutions accepting IP as collateral in the near future, right? And that would then mean that persons would apply. We don't have land. We don't have any other physical or personal assets to use. We could use their IP, and so part of that, we have to, of course, have an IP valuation framework in place, right, to be able to secure the value of these assets when they're going to be used as collateral. And that's also a major part of what we're doing now, having an IP valuation framework designed by some IP valuation experts from the UK to be able to have that as a linchpin, of course, of the whole system that the banks could feel more comfortable to be able to use as the basis to lend the strength of their IP.
All right, sounds good. All right, so something was mentioned earlier regarding tax breaks that are necessary for entrepreneurs. So Carlton, I want you to jump in and probably give us some examples that you may have seen on the international space in that regard as well.
Yeah, it is a good point. In Europe and a couple other countries, truth be told, they have actually served well when it comes to demonstrating some examples of mechanisms that do work. I think one of the things that everybody has raised as a critical point is that early stage investment. You will find that in Europe and the US, an example that has worked is angel investment, where people who are financially well off tend to, put a bit more of their capital at risk in early stage companies, high risk, high reward type of gamble. What encourages that a lot, particularly in the UK, is that there are tax mechanisms that allow them to get a tax credit on those types of investments. So they have a mechanism called, I think is Seed Entrepreneurship Investment Scheme. Up to £100,000, you get a tax credit on those types of investments. So if you're well-to-do, being able to manage your taxes and getting breaks on these things, you can see how that actually encourages you to take risks in some businesses. So you can see that's where a tax infrastructure is relatively important to encourage the behavior that's desired. They also have an EIS mechanism in the UK. That's just another jargon, but that's for larger pots of money. It's a smaller tax break, but it's for larger pots of money. It also has mechanisms to allow syndicates. So groups of people who are well-to-do, instead of one person, putting all the money in, they can do a syndicate, and the syndicate gets a tax break based on that investment, because the government appreciates that is an investment into the innovation and research and development for the country. And I believe that we, as a community and a Caribbean, we should definitely look into leveraging people who've done well, financially for themselves, reinvesting into the nation's development. I think a lot of people would be interested in that if the mechanisms encourage them to do so. The other thing that's really interesting that you see is that for the entrepreneur side of things, a lot of your research and development you can claim as some of your corporate tax when it comes to paying taxes. So that helps to encourage you to spend more on R&D, because you're going to get some of that money back, whether it's in being able to reclaim some of the VAT or some of the other taxes that you pay. The elephant in the room is that people need to pay the taxes. So if you're in an environment where people are taking advantage of the system and they're not paying the taxes, none of this works. I believe in high confidence that even if we aren't there, most of us in the Caribbean, we will be at that stage. So it is definitely worth considering putting some of these mechanisms to encourage. Because I don't always think it's about putting a stick to force people in a certain direction. Sometimes it's also about waving that carrot. And you can see how these types of carrots encourage the behavior that you want.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much for that input, Carlton. Now we have a question from the chat room, which I'm going to pose to Annette, given your vantage point as well. We have a question from Kathy Badenoch in St. Vincent, funny enough, and she's asking, how does one go about selling innovation to Caribbean governments since they are generally known for being late to the banquet?
The thing about it is that, I mean, it's a very good question. The thing about it is that when you look at our innovators, we as Invest SVG have to be that, in particularly in St. Vincent, that medium that assists our innovators. We have, what we have done in the last 6 months is design a program where we've done a whole new strategic plan, and I guess I'll speak about that later, where we are focusing on certain areas. We are targeted and focused, and we're looking at innovators in certain areas: ICTs, research and development, agriculture, mainly agri-tech. So, you know, it's not the traditional agriculture, and there's certain other areas that with creatives also. But our CARICOM leaders, our government, you know, one of the things I find is that they have a number of challenges and normally have to focus their budget and their finances in certain areas. Particularly if you look at St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for sure. We have had this year COVID, dengue, floods, volcano eruption. And while we understand that innovation and thinking outside the box and getting outside of the box, new ideas, fresh ideas, not just tourism, not just agriculture, is the way to go. And our governments understand that. There is definitely that prioritizing for government. However, we have to bring that message to them. We have to keep putting that in their face. People like us, people like this forum, JAMPRO, Kuiper, CEDAR. We have to keep that message going, that it can't be business as usual going forward, that our governments need to recognize that you cannot just look at the same old moving forward. And I do believe that that we are making baby steps, but we can't help what is happening with COVID, etc. But we are making baby steps, but there has to be a concerted effort, a concerted voice from the region and from everyone in getting that message out, and also trying to creating that environment for our innovators to grow and to be able to put forward their programs. Yes. Also, I want to say, though, and I want to touch on one other point, something I think it was Joseph or Diane said, in that they're innovators and they're innovators. They're ideas and they're ideas. And a lot of times when we have calls for innovative ideas, we get many ideas, but you have a lot of weeding out to do. So we need to be able to, I guess it goes beyond just being able to get ideas. It also goes to the point of being able to prepare people as to how to present their ideas, what we're looking for, and what will attract investment and will attract the attention maybe of our governments also. So it goes beyond just that. So I'm really happy to hear, like Joseph has spoken about, the preparation platform. Kuiper also has something that we are working on, which Dan spoke about, and we need to see more of these sort of programs within our islands and regionally also.
All right, thank you very much. One other question that pops in my mind, given that failure is a natural part of this entire entrepreneurial process, even the innovation cycle. Failure is a necessary part of the process. How poised are we and in our system, educational, even government or otherwise, prepared for that? Because what I'm hearing is that the banks are fearful that the business could fail. I'm hearing that persons are fearful of putting their ideas forward because it could fail. So everybody seems to be driving on this position of fear and wanting something that comes perfectly placed in that position. How do we remove this fear from amongst us, Diane, and get us to that point where we can start to think differently? Is it that we need to start at kindergarten and work our way up, that we get through these things? What's necessary for that transformation?
Great question, Leighton. I think you're right. We have to start at kindergarten, because I think the culture starts at kindergarten and starts with the parents. And we really have to reevaluate failure and accept failure as just a lesson along a journey. Yeah. I think one of the fundamental things that the government has done in Jamaica, and I applaud them for this, is to create the legislation which sets up a Chapter 11 approach to bankruptcy. Because I think one of the fundamental strategic errors we made was to create FinSAC in Jamaica, which was a financial sector adjustment company, which killed a lot of equity and killed entrepreneurship in people, rather than to say what the Americans do is have a Chapter 11 insolvency. So we now have an Insolvency Act in Jamaica, which allows you protection from your creditors so that you can reorganize your business, you can re-emerge. And we know many Fortune 500 companies which have re-emerged from Chapter 11 and come out stronger. So the point is really to have a legal system which allows you to fail, allows you to pick yourself up, reorganize, and come back on the market and continue with the underlying business that you have. I think that's critical. I mean, if you listen to people like Branson, they tell you, you know, he's failed 40 times. For the 3-4 times he has succeeded big time. So I think that is a critical cultural element, and I think the legal system is critical for that. But I think also that we really in CARICOM we need to expand our thinking, and as Annette said, it's not business as usual. So we need to be looking at the region-wide an environment that we need from creativity to innovation, because I'm really, really big on this. Keep talking about how many creatives we have, but if you look at the creatives, they're languishing in terms of the revenue streams, in terms of making a business of their creativity. And that fundamental issue that we need to tackle, because in the jobs of the future, one of the jobs that robots will find it much more difficult to do, and AI, is creativity, is the business of culture. And that's what we have here in abundance, but we are not marshalling it. We're not expanding the commercial opportunity.
Very good. Thank you very much for that.
Can I just
go ahead, Annie. Go ahead.
To what Diana just said there? Definitely besides the legal system that allows people to fail, I think one of the things that why people have that fear of failure is that we're not hearing enough of the successes in the region. And I think that is something that we need to make a point of. What are the successes? Get it out there, get the message out there, let people realize, listen, people are taking chances and they are succeeding. And without the chance, without taking a chance, you probably wouldn't go anywhere. So there are success stories and we need to hear them, and we need to hear them more.
But I think even more importantly, Annette, is not success stories, but success journeys. You see, that's the challenge that we have in the region. We talk about the end product when we have arrived, but very few speak about how long it took them to get there.
That's right.
Everybody knows Edison's story with the light bulbs. It took him 10,000 times wrong to get the one right. So from his perspective, he didn't fail 10,000 times. He found 10,000 ways it didn't work. And then you found one way that works. So just the way you frame the concept makes a major difference in how the outlook is going to be. Now, I see you come, your hand, Joseph. I'm going to bring in, but I want Carlton to, Marcus, to jump in here. And then I'm going to ask you a question, Joseph, that came in from the audience. So Marcus, from Jaipur, going back to this whole idea of the transformation in the educational system, in your framework, in what you're doing, where are you starting? Have you started in the schools? Are you only dealing with persons after they become adults? Because remember, by that time, they're already somewhat rigid in their thought process. They've already been inculcated a specific way. Where do you see as a starting point, or where has been your starting point to bring about this transformation that we're trying to get and this change in culture?
Right. We've been doing quite a bit, across the spectrum. We do a fair amount of public awareness work in the public and private sector. And in schools, we, do presentations on IP and entrepreneurship from primary schools, prep schools, secondary schools, tertiary, come right up. And currently, we have over the last few years been in discussion with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information to have IP infused in the curriculum, the primary school curriculum, secondary and tertiary school curriculum, to ensure that from the very get-go of education in this country, we have IP as a critical component of it, that we can link creativity to empowerment, through, of course, economics. And that's something we also see we need to understand more of. More financial literacy is important. Also understanding how our creativity can translate into livelihoods is, of course, very fundamental as well.
All right, thank you. Because we know our most creative period in our entire life is at the childhood. It's that phase when you see a box and that's to you is something else. It's a car, it's a house, it's many things, because they're able to conceptualize it until someone tells them it's not that. And they're punished for thinking differently. So we need to get that idea from that very early phase where they're thinking very widely and making mistakes at that early stage, so we can actually do the correction.
Right. What I want to also add to, is that in the region, we have a lot of competitions, right? We have a lot of science competition, music, art, dance, literature, etc., that we have to unearth talent, right? Where we have a large gap is that after we've unearthed the talent, we've had the certificates of participation and the prizes, the trophies, etc. There is no process in place to translate that into a product or a service that can earn for that person, that family, that school, and the country. And so there's a big gap to be filled, I think, through having a process in place that can plug that gap by funding for ideas to translate into actual commercial activities.
All right, so I just want to bring in Joseph. Joseph, 1 second. I'll bring in Carlton here just based on what Marcus is saying in terms of contributing to ideas, presentations, and preparations for funding when it comes to entrepreneurs. Looking at what is being said, people in the Caribbean, we're seeing the creativity, we're seeing it, they're winning certificates. But that can only go on a wall. That can't actually put food on the table. That doesn't take you very far. How can they move that now into another direction, having done that yourself as well, coming up with their different ideas? In essence, where did this accelerant idea start for you? Was it in the UK? Was it something that you saw in Barbados or somewhere in the Caribbean that led you to that part as well?
Well, I won't answer it in terms of accelerant, because then that personalizes it a bit too much. But I will share from the perspective of what I've experienced while in the Caribbean and in the UK and Europe. And I'm actually really happy to say that we're at a point of convergence. So
Excellent.
While I was in the Caribbean, there was often lots of talk and a few kind of low level competitions. We're very good at doing competitions for awards. I think we do a really good job, particularly in the Caribbean, when it comes to promoting and putting music, culture, and dance on display. When it comes to technology and developments, sometimes we don't always do it in a manner that is best for the global forum. And one thing I've seen globally that has worked really well has been kind of accelerators, incubation hubs, those kind of spaces. One, because it's a really great environment to start to expose some of these, one side of the brain type of thinkers to some of the people that they need to interact with through mentorship. I've been a part of an accelerator, and I've spoken, with people who work in the investment area, people who work in the banking space, and they'll be like, well, here are some of the things you need to think about when you want to present your idea to people like me. So it creates a safe space to learn about how these other people, want to see, or how these other people perceive or judge your idea. And the mentorship level is, it's mentorship programs built into that has a really good way of helping young entrepreneurs or people of one vintage of thinking understand how other people that will judge them, see them from their point of view of the world. it also is a great space for other people and young entrepreneurs to realize the expertise that exists within the Caribbean. There are people who are very good at a lot of things, and they're very happy to give their time. I've sat with mentors in the Caribbean while I was there that have done amazing things with their life. It's just, they've gotten comfortable and they don't like to talk about it anymore, but they've done amazing things and they've inspired me to try to do something, to their level. But, it's only when you have that environment that brings that expertise and experience with that young blood and enthusiasm that you can get some of that activity. One other thing I would say, that the accelerators and incubators do as well is when you have those competitions, when they link the competitions to international forums, and this is where I've seen the convergence occurring. I've sat at competitions in the Caribbean on the judging panel where the winning persons from that participated in a global forum. And I was really happy to see that. I've also been in conversation and I've done a little bit of mentoring and talks at some accelerators that have existed in the Caribbean as well. So I'm very happy to see that people are starting to make those linkages and convergence, because I do believe we have the talent, we have the experience, and we do have the desire and the vigor. We're as good as anybody else in the world. It's just something that's creating that space to bring it all together.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, Carlton, and from all different panelists, is in terms of an innovation ecosystem is necessary in order to drive this culture of transformation. And again, the ecosystem is here talking about the various players, the stakeholders, the community members that are all critically brought together in order to drive this aspect as well. Now for you, Joseph.
More than that,
go ahead.
To add to it, the playbook for how that space exists and how it works exists already. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of accelerators and incubator hubs that already exist and do very well.
And even here in Jamaica and throughout the region, the problem is that it's not, as you said, replicated enough in the different sectors. So it might be there for climate change, it might be there for sustainable aspects or energy aspects, but it's not there for all the other aspects. And so we need to see this best practice being transferred across a wider sector as well to bring about a holistic transformation. Now for you, Joseph, now a question came in from the audience, from Norman, right? And the question is, how can we push capital formation and profit retention in the Caribbean?
Simple answer: create the environment for it, create the ecosystem for it, because truthfully, profit retention is dependent on the market dynamics. Depends on whether or not people have sufficient confidence in the marketplace. For example, a lot of companies, they foreign entities, primarily of course, they repatriate their profits to the home countries without even a second thought. Again, what that is an environment. If we create the environment where we increase the gross capital formation, which is investment, and I know that Kuiper has been doing a substantial amount of work in terms of building the investment climate, right? You're talking about pre-approved projects, you're talking about all sorts of different things, and of course, we're more able to speak to than me. But the fact of life is that we have to look at what is the operating environment. Now, I also wanted to raise with you a couple of other things. So, just listening to the other speakers, because it struck me that, for example, we're talking about creatives, all right, and so on. The truth be spoken, and this is universal. No matter how great your idea is in this life, if you can't monetize it, what you have is an expensive hobby. Right? And this is a practical reality. I mean, no matter how you want to cut it, but the other side of it is that I find too many, and I've had years of experience in this, too many people are going into business activities or areas that they want to engage in business without doing the requisite research and knowing what exactly is involved in the area that they're going into. So you have a nice little idea and you want to run with it, but you need to do the homework. For example, a lot of companies that fail, why do they fail? They fail not because the idea is poor. They fail because they run out of cash, because at no point did anybody actually pay enough attention to how they will manage their cash flow and how they will treat in the system. And these are some of the things that we have to look at. Now, I give you a simple one using my own child. When my son was a little boy, I never gave him, and this goes to Annette's point earlier, I never gave him lunch money, so to speak, or an allowance. What I did is that I created for him the thought process whereby you want me to give you money, earn the money. So I give him simple little tasks, and he would be doing this, and I said, okay, this amount is for you to go and buy toys and do whatever else you want. This amount we will save. So from early in his life, I taught him a culture of saving and how to work for something, how to monetize what it is. He would come to me with, when he got a little older, with some prices that you just laugh and say, good, nice dream. Not gonna happen. But in other words, it taught him the power of negotiating, how to pitch his idea, what he thought he was worth in terms of it. And it's something I would comment to several others, because I do believe that it really does start when you're young. When we're young, you have to build that culture, build that thought process. Because when you're at school, if all of us, if you think about it, when you're at school and you're in class, the teacher would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? You say you want to be a doctor? Good. You want to be a nurse? Good. You want to be a policeman? Good. You want to be a businessman? You sure that's what you want to do? Because it fell outside of the traditional sphere. And it's a reality. So it is a culture, and it's a culture that's an impediment, but we have to overcome it because time has overtaken a lot of these things that we have to treat with it. And the last thing I wanted to say on this sphere is that in all of this, and I keep saying it's about information asymmetry. People need to read and get themselves up to speed on it. And in this regard, myself, through CARICOM, we have put together a book which is free. The New Normal, a Post-COVID Primer for Business. I would urge persons to Google it. I'm sure Leighton Joel can put the link in the
Yeah, we should put it in the chat. We should put it in the chat, Joel, in the YouTube chat, so persons can see it at one time.
Right. So because that is the kind of thing. It tells you, walks you through from if you want to restart a business, how to continue a business, the importance of human resource and human capital development. What is it you're looking at in terms of customer engagement, marketing, etc., plus the new opportunities that emerging. In other words, I'm saying all of this to say that with concerted effort, yes, there are obstacles. Yes, there will be challenges in terms of traditional thinking versus new form thinking. But the honest truth of it is that people are no longer limited to countries, to national borders. That's why you have the internet. People can market themselves on a global scale. But for you to do that, this is where your IP comes into place. This is where you have to create the requisite protections for yourself and your product. Too many persons, have started businesses, put good ideas on the global stage. They not go through patent protection or any form of protection, and others come and steal it from them. So these are some of the things that I just want to put on the table for additional consideration. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So once again, what you're highlighting is the necessity of a framework that brings together all the different bits and pieces of the puzzle, because they are there, they're in existence, they're functioning in isolation, but there's nothing that has brought them together to create this cohesive environment or this ecosystem, this culture that's necessary to bring about the innovation in the way that we all know it should be, and it has not yet been as well. Now, another question that's coming for us, Diane, from the chat room is from Kathy again. Now, she's asking, CXC is the main examination body in the region. Can we push to them to have them and other regional bodies such as the University of the West Indies, University of Technology, help build the gap between creativity and academia and business innovation space? So in essence, triangulate all three parties. So we know we have the ideas, we're creative, we have some academic aspect, but still there seems to be this third wheel that is not connected. Is there anything we can do in that sense?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Kathy. I think it's a great question because we spoke about education. I think education in the Caribbean needs a revolution, not a reformation. We're really talking about the companies that we deal with, our clients at Jampro, constantly tell us they need critical thinking skills, they need problem solving, they need collaboration and teamwork. These are the kinds of soft skills that are going to be required for the jobs of the future. What we've done under the Global Services Sector project is to develop a whole digital skills curriculum and job readiness curriculum. We are now in discussion with the Ministry of Education to put that into the secondary school curriculum in Jamaica, but it needs to really be region-wide. We need to revolutionize the whole curriculum so that it addresses the question of soft skills, it addresses the question of entrepreneurship, and it addresses the question of vocational training and apprenticeship as different routes to go to the jobs of the future. Because the jobs of the future, and Joseph hinted at this, are not going to be doctors, lawyers, and accountants, because AI is going to do most of that. So we really need to be looking at the jobs which we don't know what they will look like, but we know they will need certain skills, critical skills and soft skills. So yes, we need to really, and I find that some of the most conservative thinkers in the region are in education. And I think that this is something that we really need to challenge. And I think the university is a good place, because the university has the ability to challenge this kind of received thinking. You have computer science departments, you have cross-cultural, reggae studies, dancehall studies, you have a cross-cultural plus science. So you need to put all of these together and look at how do we change the regional curriculum to bring out people who are much more relevant to the job market of tomorrow. Because right now we have too many lawyers. We don't know what we're going to do with them, but they're not all going to find a place in a courtroom. So there are ways to employ legal training, and that is where we need to broaden the whole way we look at developing a diversified economy for the region. Because diversified means that we will create opportunities for all these people, but we have to take a different approach to training. And I mentioned vocational training, particularly because if you look at the success of a country like Germany, it's because of vocational training and apprenticeship that they have been able to develop this huge cohort of export-oriented industries. So Kathy, long way of answering your question perhaps, but really I think we have to revolutionize education and training.
All right, so Carlton, being one that came out of the educational framework most recently from persons on the panel, I want to pose something to you, bringing you in that whole idea of education, academia, and its role in bringing about the collaborative aspects and transformation. One of the questions came in from Matthew from Jamaica, and you can touch on that as well, is considering what we've been saying about innovation so far, how might one develop his or her creativity in adulthood? Now, this is assuming from someone that, it may have been there, may have been dormant, and now they're trying to resurrect or to develop this aspect of themselves so that they can move forward in another area. How does one go about doing that? I don't know, Carl, if you can answer that. If you can, touch on that, but definitely wherever you can about academics.
Yeah, definitely. So my comments are anecdotal. So let me just make that note. In my experience, academia, when it comes to fostering entrepreneurship, the role of academia works best as collaborators and facilitation than education, I would say. Many times when people try to teach entrepreneurship, it tries to break something into a formula that often isn't a formula. However, some interesting notes were made when it talks about soft skills. I think that's an excellent role that education and academia can play. And then I usually consider that more facilitation. Having extracurricular activities where you facilitate young students being able to see what good looks like. You bring people in that they can talk to, where that's not a course per se, but you are able to put people on display that they can see. Representation is really important. Another thing that's really works is sometimes some of the stuff that we take for granted when it comes to simple things like understanding different finance mechanisms and understanding how to manage finances. I think that should be something that should be a course that everybody should have to do very early stages in their life. Bring it back though to the question around kind of fostering the creativity and entrepreneurship in adulthood. I think what I've seen a lot of academic associations do is that they form a lot of collaboration where they help to do some of the R&D. So if you have an idea, academia is great for turning an idea, creating a process, and validating it. So we actually do quite a lot of work with academia right now on transforming some of those ideations into ideas through various projects and grants that are funded. And sometimes the university itself may actually facilitate that. So that collaboration I find often works well because you can see how they're two very different operations. One is an idea, one is really good at turning things into processes and churning out results.
Yeah.
Also creating that space of an alumni, because that's the other thing that academia has a very good access to, which is a network, where academia has an extremely large portfolio of amazing people that have gone through their door or that are affiliated with them that they can create links for you too. I'm always very skeptical and worried though when academia tries to create a formula for entrepreneurship. I think it's a lot better when it facilitates and collaborates, because I think it gives people the tools to get it done. But as soon as you create a formula for something that's moving and so fluid, it becomes kind of obsolete very quickly.
Yeah, yeah, very good point.
Can I just add one quick thing to that?
Sure, Dan, go ahead.
I think you're absolutely right. Carlton, I think you can't teach those things. What you can teach, though, is problem solving. It's how to approach problems,
100%.
how to see opportunity, how to take a different look at problem solving techniques is the only way I can think of putting it. And that's where I also think the importance of entrepreneurship and vocational training, learning by doing, that is really, I think, different modes of learning, and learning by doing is also a critical piece of the puzzle that we're not implementing.
Yeah.
100%. I would say that definitely fits really well when it comes to building a great workforce. So I would actually implore that we should do that beyond just looking at entrepreneurship, because I think your point is excellent. Learning by doing is just great as a skill for us as a civilization. So I would definitely say that I would agree with that as well.
Excellent. Annette, I see you want to jump in here.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add something very quickly. I just wanted to say, I absolutely agree with the points made about the education system. And that's the point I was trying to make early on when I addressed about how traditional we are. And we do, absolutely need to revamp our educational system and make people more thinkers rather than just learn by rote going along. But I do also think that our universities and stuff could be facilitators. So create a workspace, as Dan said earlier, create a workspace for people, like-minded people to come together, like-minded innovators to come together and bring their ideas. But beyond just doing that, just bringing their ideas, we now have to also create that environment for them those ideas to grow and to actually become something. So I do see that universities need to be more facilitators when it comes to creating that workspace for them.
All right, thank you very much for that. Go ahead, Marcus. Yeah,
man, I just want to also add to that, certainly what we've been doing here in Jamaica too, through JIPO, is working with the universities to establish what we call TISC centers, Technology and Innovation Support Centers. And know that other regions, other territories in the region have like an IP help desk, that could be also instituted at different universities to be able to assist, the public, who are stakeholders too, to do research and to maybe carry out certain tests, etc. But also what we recognize is that the universities themselves oftentimes are doing a lot of research, which again is really directed towards master's and PhD degrees when they're not thinking along a line of commercialization. And so we are also working with them to see how they can merge those two objectives, right? While you're doing your research for your PhD, for your master's degree, you're doing something in biochemistry and physics, engineering, etc. Think about the commercial opportunities from the get-go and see how you can both merge academic pursuits with commercial objectives as well. Very
Yeah, that's
important.
a fact. And being an academic and working at the very same thing, the University of West Indies as well, one of the things I've observed is that same thing. Most persons have their PhDs and it sits on a shelf or maybe in a journal article somewhere that very few people actually read. But most of these things could actually have commercial value. But because they've never been told or they've never been trained or never been thought, that thought process never goes through their mind. And so it sits there until it becomes very stale. Then they see someone else with a solution and say, oh, you know what, my idea could have actually been that. But nobody told me that I could have taken it that far. So I'm very glad to hear that Jaipo has taken initiative to enter into that space and to start having that conversation to change the mindset, which again brings about the cultural transformation which we're trying to get. Now, as we think about this thing, and coming back to you, Marcus, and probably Joseph can touch on this one too. You guys may have been through the region. You know, you have that regional aspect, regional approach. Having traveled, what are the specific types of products and methods or processes of innovation that you have observed? Because I think this is important for, as persons are thinking about innovation, everybody's thinking, okay, I need to come up with a blue sky research, something that nobody else has ever thought of before. But maybe all it requires is a slight modification here or there in order to bring about something great. So what may have you observed throughout that could be, you know, some ideas or examples to get that juice turning, kind of like what I think Matthew was asking before, you know, how does he get that creativity coming through in that sense as well?
Adulthood, right. Well, I mean, I think one for me, I think having a passion is important, you know, something that you are interested to pursue a certain line of research on, or maybe you see yourself as a graphic artist, you are an animator. I think certainly digital economy is something that is very critical now for the future of IP and innovation in the region, you know, and so what we would certainly want to do is to encourage the youth, again, majority of them being online, you know, to be able to see how they can create innovative creations, packages, services, digitally and electronically that can also, of course, be protected and commercialized with appropriate IP rights, right? So for us, I think that is very important. You know, we can't compete in all the manufacturing and engineering sectors with the world, right? But what we can certainly compete with is, as we've seen, our cultural and creative industries. And so those new media types of technologies, I think we need to prepare for and empower our youth to maximize their creativity through and use the IP rights to leverage and promote these as being new areas of IP from the Caribbean, from Jamaica that can take over the world, you know?
All
So
right.
that's how I would approach it.
Thank you very much, Marcus. So as we draw the time to a close, I'm seeing the clock. We have 5 minutes remaining. Diane, yeah, I'm going to give you the chance to come in next. We want to try and now see how we can tie everything together as we bring this to a bit of a close. Go ahead now, Diane.
Yeah, I wanted to say that one of the things I gave a talk to graduating class of the Marcus Garvey Technical High School in St. Anne. And one of the things I said to them, because they were IT students, is you really need to look at how you can parlay your passion, as Marcus was saying, into monetary or revenue stream. Because you one thought the biggest blogger in the world right now is earning 45 million. She has earned 45 million from a simple blog which started about how to do makeup. So I'm just leaving you with that silly idea. So you don't know, there are always people who are interested in what you are interested in. And so it's finding like-minded people across the planet and finding a way to monetize and become an influencer. We have some big influencers in the region and they should be doing the same thing. And so really, I think for me, my kind of final word since we're wrapping up is that the Caribbean has to start to learn how to move from ideation and from creativity to innovation. And that means that we have to develop the ecosystem and the culture and nurture those young people who have the ideas, and older people, because they're silver surfers who have started businesses as well. But it's really about creating that innovation ecosystem which will support and help people to move from that idea stage into commercialization. And that, I think, is a fundamental thing that we need to do, but we need to put it on the agenda of government, because government has to be an enabler. It's not going to be the entrepreneur, it has to be an enabler. And so academia, private sector, all of us need to get together collaboratively, build that ecosystem.
Excellent. And I'm glad that we started here with GP as a facilitator as well as an implementer to bring about this transformation. Joseph, we'll move to you, then Annette, and then Carlton will close us out.
All right. My thoughts on this, I absolutely agree with what Dan has said. But it strikes me that when I'm looking through the region, the opportunities that I see emerging are one in terms of ICT and the whole development of that. Because when we look at the reality that most of our businesses do not have a website. They don't have a dynamic website for those who even have a website. Most of it on some Facebook page or something like that. The reality of life is that if we start to transition into the realm of e-commerce, we'll need that type of involvement. There's a lot of scope for that, a lot of scope in the development of apps for all sorts of things. We have a scope in terms of real estate development, because as we transition and given the disruptions that have happened, you have a lot of opportunities for nearshoring. In other words, there's a whole realm of opportunity that's out there. But the truth of it is that this is not something that you can teach somebody, so to speak. You can help them through critical thinking. They can open their minds by reading. But the truth be spoken is that you have to look at it, recognize the opportunity. And as I've said before, and then re-emphasize, this is an issue where you have to learn to monetize your hobby, as it were, monetize your idea, because without that, you're not going anywhere with it. But with that, I thank you all for this opportunity, because it strikes me that this indeed, and to you, Leighton, and to Joel, it strikes me that this should be one of a series of engagements on these issues, because I think that this is the kind of conversation we need to have where we share resources and share on concepts to drive this region forward. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And that's the intention, to have it as a series as well. So Annette, as you bring in for that closing remarks as well.
Okay, thanks a lot. I just want to say very quickly, it can't be business as usual. I mean, I hear what Dan and everyone has to say, and I completely agree with them. Our young people are naturally very ICT based. They're tech savvy naturally. You look at them with their little devices. I mean, I have a daughter. She's an influencer by just posting a lot of stupidness on Instagram, and she's already an influencer, of which she will make some money for me. But now I'm going to have to go home and have that conversation with her on how to monetize what she's doing. Thank you, Diane, for bringing up that idea. And this is what we need to do for most of our young people going forward. We got to create that environment. We got to give them the ideas. We just have to make sure that that environment is there. And it cannot be just us sitting around here and talking about this. It is a great platform. I love the whole concept of us talking about it. It's got to start from above. Our policymakers, our governments also have to be part of this conversation going forward.
All right, so that's something that we'll look forward to at the next part of our series, to bring some of the decision makers, the policy makers to the forefront, so that they could realize that this is a necessity and something that we all are in agreement with and agreement of as well. So Carlton, you want to say your points as well?
Yeah, I would just kind of make some real closing statements when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation when it comes to the Caribbean context. It's an interesting thing when I see it from my perspective, because we actually have come a long way. We do make progress. I guess we don't always see it, but I'm actually seeing a lot more Caribbean students and a lot more Caribbean entrepreneurs and individuals participating in a global forum. It was a really good point that was made earlier when it comes to being able to present yourself to participate in a global forum. I think that's really important. And it's often really small things. It's just that sometimes when you only see yourself as an individual, you don't realize how much it adds when you are trying to put on a certain presentation or present a certain narrative in a global forum. But we definitely have been improving and making strides.
Right, and thank you very much. And what we're seeing, even on the music front, this is why you could have an emerging artist because they understand where reggae is on the global platform. They are very confident when they need to go to Europe or to go somewhere else, because they're saying, those that have gone before me, I know this thing is a good seller, is a big seller, so they're confident that they will most likely succeed. The same thing must happen. The examples must be put forward of the different areas that we have been successful. Sports, we're seeing it. We're seeing it in terms of music and culture, but we need to see it even in terms of business. We have the Lee Chins and a few other such individuals, but they're very one-off. And it's easy for us to say, well, he had it before. Maybe he had an advantage. Maybe with the Sandals and the Stewarts, they had some advantage. That's how many may perceive it. But there are many others who were in the little quiets, in the country, and somewhere else, that have now catapulted into the future and have now been very grown, very advanced, and very successful, but it's not widely known. And so we need to have more of the innovators like yourself and entrepreneurs like yourself, Carlton, coming to the forefront, speaking of their experiences. How did you get there? What was it? What did it take? What mindset did you have? And they may find the commonalities, the similarities, and then now believe that they could achieve. And that's one of the key things when they talk about this transformation. It's the belief that now needs to drive a change in behavior, therefore bring about a different action, therefore, of course, changing the outcome. And that belief, now what we know happens in many cases, many are told to think outside of the box. But what if we were to think that there may not even be a box in the first place? What about that concept? And I think that's really where we need to get to. Stop thinking that there is a box, that you're in the Caribbean, you're in a small space, you're all these things. As you said, Carlton, earlier, we are in a global market. I can be just as influential here in the Caribbean as Steve Jobs, as Elon Musk, as anyone else anywhere in the world if I simply change my belief system. And so that's the kind of a thing we want to bring about in this cultural transformation that we're trying to get to. We're the Caribbean to the world in that idea as well. So I want to thank you all for your participation. And thank you for the knowledge you've shared and the experiences you've brought to the table that I'm sure has left a wealth of knowledge for our viewers and our listeners who will hear us now live, but also those who will tap in the future and be inspired to bring about the transformation which we're spoken of. I'm hoping that you guys will be willing at some other time in the future, as the series continues, to play a part, to give your contributions, and to continue sharing whatever you have come to understand as well. So at this point, I want to hand over to Tay, who will take us through our closing aspects as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leighton. This has been a wonderful session. And on behalf of Growth Perspectives, I'd like to appreciate all our panelists for this stimulating discussion around creating and sustaining a culture of innovation in our countries. I must admit that time flew by and there's lots of nuggets that have been dropped. And the take-home points that we've had from this session are also applicable, not just in the Caribbean, but in other countries around the world as well, especially in Africa and Latin America. So we'll try to make this content available for future reference. So we at Global Perspectives are passionate and positioned to solve the challenges that hinder business growth. And events like these are one of our strategies to enabling business scaling and reinvention. So today is just the beginning of a regular convening of great mastermind discussions, just like we've mentioned before. And our next events will be a diagnosis of the circular economy and sustainable businesses in the Caribbean and Africa, and the opportunities they present to us. We will feature a set of experienced leaders in the field from one of our partners. That's the Moody's Analytics Global Education Incorporated. So please watch out for this space. And our mandate is to provide data-driven solutions to firms, multilaterals, and governments. So please reach out to us by email. That's at info@growthperspectives.co, or visit our website, www.growthperspectives.co. And please don't forget to subscribe to our social media channels to stay current on the exciting things we have lined up for you. So thank you very much again for joining us, and we hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye all.
Thank you. Wonderful session. Thank you.
Bye-bye.